Motion Studies class service project with group and team with Box of Balloons. Of the 11% of North Dakota citizens under the poverty line, 12% of those are children, according to the Census Bureau information. Poverty is not a new concept for us. We are closer to being in poverty than we are to being millionaires, and being able to show compassion to those less fortunate is something that gives back to everyone involved. For the past couple of months, our team has partnered with Box of Balloons to have hands-on experience creating birthday boxes for children in need of a celebration. Children in low-income families experience stress and are at risk for an impact on emotional development. Supporting events like Box of Balloons can create special moments for those who cannot always afford it. We will discuss the background behind the nonprofit organization Box of Balloons, provide insight into the lives of families living in poverty, and how Box of Balloons is creating an impact upon these families. When children are living in hard situations that are out of their control, being able to celebrate their birthday will take financial burden off of their parents and allow for the kids to fully enjoy a day dedicated to them. Kenna will now be discussing the background behind the nonprofit organization Box of Balloons.
Box of Balloons, Box of Balloons is a nationwide nonprofit organization with over 40 chapters in 33 different states. Their goal is simple, and that is to ensure that each child feels special and celebrated on their birthday. Box of Balloons states a child's birthday should be happy despite a family's current situation, financial status, or living conditions. The primary focus in the Fargo-Moorhead area of Box of Balloons is the ages 0 through 12 years old, and they get referrals from different community partners. Katie Dukart is the director. Katie Dukart is the director in the Fargo-Moorhead area and leads the organization with so much enthusiasm as she showed us around her space during our time there. Volunteering experience that I had was super unique to any other volunteering experience I've had. I fortunately get the opportunity to volunteer at my internship through Blue Cross quite frequently, but most of the volunteering that I do there is based on their basic needs. So we do things like boxing up food and donating clothes. But with Box of Balloons, you're taking it one step further and providing a child with more than just their basic needs. Getting to celebrate a child on their birthday is so fulfilling because you know that they wouldn't otherwise be celebrated in their situation. According to Katie Dukart, one thing that she pointed out was that these gifts extend past their birthdays. In fact, most of the kids even keep the box that they receive, especially if they live in unstable environments. She shared that they use their box instead of trash bags to carry their things from place to place. After creating the children's birthday surprises, you can't help but wish to be there on their special day and watch them open it with all their excitement. Now that I've given you a little bit of background about this organization, McKenna is going to tell you about how birthdays impact low-income families.
Children in low-income families also experience stress. It's not just the parents that are experiencing these emotions. The stress hormone cortisol is reported to be higher in children of low-income families than children who are in families above the poverty level, according to the Children's Defense Fund. According to the fund, 16% of children ages 17 and below are living through poverty. They also state that income and wealth inequality are growing and harming children in low income. The Children's Defense Fund also states that the child poverty rate is a crisis that has a solution. A solution to ending that is helping government assistance programs curb the negative effects that poverty has on children, families, and the economy. Box of Balloons has been a great eye-opening experience for myself, just being able to realize that not everyone even gets to celebrate something so unique to them as their own birthday. Because sometimes we don't think about that not everybody even gets to celebrate their own dedicated day to themselves. Box of Balloons allowed for me to feel like I was personally being able to be a part of this child's life and that I was making a difference in their special day. Next, Anna will be discussing how Box of Balloons is getting to help to make the impact on families living in poverty.
Box of Balloons has opened 3 new chapters, expanding their reach to 24 chapters in 14 different states. They have already donated 748 boxes in need. This is significant for their organization. They take 0.85 cents of every dollar funds for their birthday. The remaining 15% funds businesses' legal and accounting tools necessary for their organization. They take their donations and put it towards boxes and supplies. A big help for this organization is the growing numbers of volunteers who support their mission. There are currently over 1,200 volunteers making their mission to help kids celebrate their birthday. Box of Balloons has made me see through different lenses. Not every child gets to celebrate their birthday, but Box of Balloons makes it so they can. We are able to bring happiness and hope to children across the nation. This organization has impacted me greatly to see the difference that is made on children. Now Kenna will show us how to create a box.
Okay, so when you're coming in to volunteer at Box of Balloons, I'm going to kind of walk you through how it would look for you. So first, right away, you're going to be getting a piece of paper that's going to be having the child's name, how old they're turning, their birthday, like a theme and color that they're wanting for their birthday, and then just a couple of gifts that they were also kind of hoping to get. When you get this, you're literally 100% taking this child's birthday idea and putting it into a box. So you're decorating the box kind of on the theme and color that they're wanting. So you're going to be wrapping the box, and then with all of the gifts that they have, you're going to actually be going and picking out they have all these cabinets full of all the essentials for a birthday, so cups, plates, napkins, little goodie bags, gifts. You're literally fully just creating that and hand designing it for this child. So it really makes you feel like you are a part of this child's day. And then also too, Katie Card, kind of right before their birthday is going to be putting some birthday cupcakes, some of those things like that. And then they do have a wish list, which we'll kind of be talking about, but the wish list is going to be updating all the time depending on the child and the birthday. So if you are interested in actually donating, we will have that link for you. So then I'll let Kenna take it over.
Yeah, so up on this slide, as well as in the back, I put a stack so you can take them home with you. You have their social medias here, and then like McKenna said, this link on the bottom for donations and their wish list. Just so you can keep up with them and follow them along their journey and getting to see what kind of things they put together. And then like McKenna said, the wish list is where things can be purchased. They specifically put gifts on there that they know the kids would want so that they kind of pertain to their interests instead of having the main gift be donated as well, like everything else. So that's kind of what the wish list is about. Organizations like Box of Balloons are created an opportunity for people like us to go out and volunteer to help relieve some families of the financial problems birthday parties can create. Box of Balloons is helping celebrate these special days one child at a time. Thank you.
Okay, we do have some evaluation, or at least the QR code to scan in for evaluations. Those are super important for feedback for our students presenting today. So I'm gonna kind of try to figure out a way to hand those out with the raffle tickets. But first we're gonna take any questions that you might have for them about Box of Balloons or about their major or anything.
Did you want me to put up our QR code?
Sure. Yep. If you have a question, I'll come running to you. I know I have a couple, but okay.
I can just talk really loud.
Okay.
Oh, they're not thing right here.
Microphones
We love
everywhere.
that.
All right. So are we able to volunteer for this as well?
Yeah, I'll take it over. What was your name?
Mallory.
Mallory. Okay, so of course you are actually able to go in and talk to them any single time. You can volunteer anytime. Lots of different organizations on campus have just literally texted her, and she's like 100%. You can come in anytime, volunteer. It's super easy. It's super fun. It's honestly really rewarding. So on that piece of paper, if you do want to pick that up, and if you do want to talk to us, we can give you actually her phone number. But on their social media page, you can kind of reach out to them, messaging them, and asking to get involved as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I can talk really loud. So what made you decide Box of Balloons out of the countless other volunteer organizations in the community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like we decided on this organization based on the fact that, kind of like I said before, you know, most of the volunteering that you get to do around here, you go to food banks and you box up foods and you donate clothes, which is really great and super helpful. Everybody needs those things. But I think that this organization is super exciting to go volunteer at because you know that you're providing a child with so much more than what they need. And in the box too, that they get 6 goodie bags to hand out. So I think a lot of things, one thing that we don't remember is that a child who's in need doesn't necessarily get to give anything away either. And so it's kind of a rewarding thing for them too, to be able to give something away and receive something on their special day. So I think that all around this organization is just super amazing in helping a child celebrate their day. So
I can talk pretty loud too. So how long have you worked in Box of Balloons?
Yeah, I can take that over. So I got involved with Box of Balloons actually in the fall of 2021. Like I said, it was actually for group and team with Teresa Hest. And it was for another organization project that we had, and we kind of heard about them through Facebook. And so I've been involved with them since I think last October. And they're really rewarding too because she is constantly reaching out to me, seeing how I'm doing too. So not only is this organization super helpful with providing just care for these children, but they also really care for their volunteers and they are checking up on you. So I got involved in the fall and then we got involved again in the spring. So for 6 months. Can you do my math?
And I'm gonna ask the last question. Does Box of Balloons usually, is it just their own entity when they start in the community? Or do they combine like with a church or with?
Yeah, a whole entity.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, so that's a big endeavor kind of, you'd think almost they partner and it would kind of make it a little bit easier to establish, but that's amazing that they just come in, whoever decides to run it in that community. That's a lot, that's great.
Yeah, it's really cool too with how big they're or how much they're expanding too, over the country.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, lots of the people who are donating are, churches and, other organizations who know of this organization. So I'm assuming through there, they're kind of getting involved with each other just to bring up the other as well. But, it is their own entity.
I found it amazing in Fargo Moorhead how different charities support each other too.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's great. Okay, well, final round of applause, thanks ladies. Everyone should make sure, if you scan the QR code for evaluations, don't take both of the raffle tickets, only take one with the number on it so we can use the other one to draw.
I turned it off, so I didn't have that awkward, talking myself.
Okay, you good? I believe so. Okay. So whatever you do, don't touch the box. Count it.
I heard some of that.
Quick question, is this recorded so that we can go back and okay, cool, because we forgot to record for today. That'll be great.
Yay.
Good luck.
Oh, go ahead, I'm not recording. Oh, okay. I was like,
Yeah, Put on it.
Sneak around you?
No, you can. Yeah, Katie Card for this. I guess we did ask her though. Yeah.
been
how to
there.
just
That
zoom
would
in
be a
on the
question
wall
for
over here.
Katie. Yeah,
In
so
between,
we
so
have
it's-
an aspect.
so they can then
She also did
do their stuff and then zoom out and
things,
kind of
but it's
position.
the first time we're not getting it first.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's pretty bland. Yeah, yeah.
Presentation or like.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right, yeah, yeah. But I think just from the start, yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Thank you. Oh, right.
Text me, see where they What? Text me.
Yeah, okay.
You can click this next to your collar,
Okay.
and then, yeah. Basically the rest of it is best.
That would be my look.
You want to
I wanna do one of those too.
You want to stand?
Sure.
Yes.
I think we're gonna make the thing go up.
It's nice to.
I got here for the good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just about.
This is.
Yes.
We're gonna need to get us one.
Alright.
Okay, paper, can I use your thing?
Yep. Please make sure all the colors are right, so your face don't come out like.
Orange. Yeah, green.
Alright, we're good. And I think we're good. Okay, we're gonna start by giving your names and how to pronounce it.
Yeah, my name is McKenna Anderson.
I'm Kenna Thornburg.
I'm Anna Stebbins.
Before we begin, just make sure you keep looking at them and not at the camera.
Yeah. That makes it a lot easier. Alright,
That's how I say paper, yeah.
alright, so what inspired you to do this project?
Yeah, like I had brought up previously, it was a project that I had to do for a group and team. So originally hearing about it, you hear of all these different organizations that we just had in Fargo Moorhead, and I think Box Balloons stuck out just because of how rewarding it was to be able to feel like you were personally giving back, making an impact. We were super intrigued by it right away. I think that with getting involved and picking Box Balloons was just because it was so, it was kind of familiar, just because of how personal they make like the connections with you and just like reaching out to them, they just make you feel very like right away from the start that you were already a part of their team, you know, so nice to meet you. They were just so inviting and so inclusive. That was really rewarding.
That's great. I guess what sort of interesting things did you do or discover when you were doing this?
The interesting thing that we got to do was just right away when we came in, I guess that we didn't really know what we were expecting. I did not know that I would actually be getting a full piece of paper with the child's like wants and needs and names. And you started from fresh. You wrapped your own box. You felt like you were personally wrapping this gift for, you know, one of your friends. So it just like really felt like you were personally like making this box for them. And then you're gonna be putting in all of the papers, cups, all of the streamers. So you're personally picking out every single detail put inside of the box. So that was, I think, the main of it was you're just doing all of it. And then at the end, you're gonna be like writing like a thank you note or a happy birthday. So it kind of, you know, you wrote out your little note to them and made it feel like you were a part of their day, which was really special.
That's awesome. How do you feel about being able to present what you did here at the conference, like in person this year? Because, you know, 2020 was canceled, 2021 was over Zoom.
Yeah, yeah. In 2021, when I did the academic conference, we got Zoom hacked. So I think to be here and actually being able to present in front of people was way better. And we're all communication studies, so we want to be on that one-on-one, actually, you know, being able to get questions right away and answer instead of just feeling like a robotic on a computer and just being at the conference. It was just so much more like, good, we're here, I can actually see you. So I really like volunteered with them a couple of times, and those each were also another 6 boxes. So we're doing probably like 30 boxes total is what we've done so far, but Kate's food cart is amazing. She is creating boxes every single day, and so many of them too. I mean, she's constantly in with kids, and so she's probably done hundreds and hundreds of boxes, and she's also said it to us too, that she'll go home, her and her husband, and we'll make these boxes, you know, during the night, you know, off the clock. So she's really dedicated to this program. It's awesome. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I was looking through the itinerary, like the schedule of it,
Yeah.
and I saw this one, I'm like, that's awesome. I guess, I don't know, it struck a chord with me because my niece's birthday was literally yesterday.
Aww.
Right, and she was turning 1 year old. I'm like, oh, we got to have a special party, but I'm like, what if she couldn't?
Exactly. I think that's just kind of the whole thought process. And so you forget that some people don't even get the opportunity to experience their own birthday, you know, and the people who are fortunate, it's like that's not even like a thought process behind it. It's like, oh, it's your birthday, like we're gonna be doing something, we're gonna celebrate you. So it was really awesome with this program, because then everybody does get to feel celebrated when they should be. So yeah.
I just think it's all amazing.
Yeah. It was really awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, Jason missed it all. You would know if Jason was here.
I know you.
No, over Zoom. Nice to meet you in person. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you are the only one. Jason, you got to see me. I know.
Yeah.
I thought in my head, I was like, I'm never going to be able to actually meet Jason in person, but I feel like I know him in person now.
I didn't sign up to do like what Stacy's doing today because I wanted to go to all my students.
Yeah.
Because some of them I've never met in person.
Yeah.
So I'm a bad person.
I know, made it. Yeah, we're gonna do that.
You guys have
So you
missed
can kind
the
of do it,
joy
Stacy, if you want,
meeting
okay,
Dr.
when you
Anderson
start.
in person, Jay.
Yes.
Now you're just making up stuff.
I always tell students, on the
Okay.
inside,
And
he's
then
really a
kind of
big teddy bear. That's what I say.
Cover, they're gonna scan.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's all an act. It's all an act. It's all a front.
Some days I also call him my work husband. That's a whole nother committee. Okay, you're not streaming that, are you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, we'll get started because we're running. Okay, gotta turn it on. So for this session, I'd like you all to meet Ashley Young, who was just accepted to grad school this morning, so congratulations. She is gonna be discussing online learning versus face-to-face and conducted an exploratory study. She is a student in the School of Communication and Journalism.
Thank you. So the exploratory study that we just recently conducted. So as I go over these facts, please bear with me that these are preliminary. We have not completed a research paper or anything yet. So it's been a lot of fun to dig into this. So the exploratory study that we did was looking at students' cognitive, normative, and behavioral beliefs and perceived perceptions regarding the online or face-to-face learning modality. So it's common to hear in the realm of education things like, you learn better in a face-to-face setting, or you don't learn as much in an online course compared to face-to-face. But are these statements factual? So what factors actually go into students' decision-making processes when it comes to choosing a particular learning modality? So Fishbein and Augen's early research taught us the foundational knowledge, which helps us understand and explain why we behave in a particular way. So in our case, why students might approach or avoid specific learning opportunities based on that delivery method. So we were looking at the resulting data to help maybe instructors review and revise course formats. Maybe we could look for ways to better meet students' preferred learning methods, and perhaps perhaps even leave you, the audience, with a new perspective regarding online learning. So today I'll introduce the findings of our exploratory research, first with an overview on the background as to why I chose this topic, and then I'll highlight the results that piqued my interest thus far. And then lastly, I'll speak to the future of what is yet to come with this research project. So first, I'll briefly touch on my interest in this topic. So I transferred in from M-State in the fall of 2020. So many instructors and students alike had crash course Zoom, where I came from an online learning format already. So the first time was due to the pandemic, and so the differences that we had discussed kind of had a lot to do with the constraints and frustrations people were feeling with being kind of tossed into this new method. And so for me as a non-traditional student, I actually had to resign from my career in order to make face-to-face classes fit into my life. So I had always kind of agreed with the sentiment, just as I had known it, that face-to-face education must be better. And so as my personal experience with online learning increased, so did my respect for the modality. So we compiled MSUM student feedback to help us understand this ever-evolving educational landscape, and also to identify the forces that drive students to select the distinctive learning method. So Jason Anderson, Dr. Jason Anderson, who's my advisor on this project, shout out to the back row there, we created an electronic survey tool, and so he graciously took on an independent research project for me. So this is an aside, this isn't for a class or anything, this was just my tenacity to want to learn more about research. So we created this survey and we distributed it via email and also on D2L, or the Desire to Learn online platform. And I had reached out to professors throughout the School of Communication and Journalism to see if they would also share it, and some kindly offered extra credit as well. And Dean Beal was also instrumental in widening our net that we were able to cast. So we were able to collect quite a few data points on this. So then we'll go into the findings next. So this here just kind of talks about the little bit of background of what we were looking at. So just to give you a describing of what beliefs and attitudes are and kind of the lingo that we use here. So when we talk about rank ordering, so that was the very first task that we looked at. We asked our students to have a selection of a drop-down box and rank by the level of importance for them. And so we had them look at what is the most important decision that leads to shaping their choices. And so this one's kind of a pretty colorful one, but this is the one that you really want to look at. So the number one thing that was most important was actually that the course fit into their schedule. So number one, out of 188 people, out of 249 total respondents, chose fits my schedule. Next was instructor. Third is content. Fourth was actually if it was required for them to take the class by their major or the last requirement. The amount of effort. Then comes which modality, face-to-face, online learning, or whether it's a hybrid or high flex, which we discovered a lot of people don't even know what that means. So that's kind of if you have the option of being in person or in classroom. So we developed 3 blocks of questions that outline Fishbein and Augen's research on the antecedents of behavior, so our attitudes, our norms, and the behavioral control. We also looked at research questions from a Hilton, Moos, and Barnes study. So this study looked at students' online experience and their major and their perceived learning outcomes in face-to-face versus online. So we use these 2 frameworks to develop our survey tool. So first, let's consider the Barnes items and their attitudes towards the modality. So the correlation between age and online versus face-to-face learning. So this next one that we're going to look at here is some fun stuff that I love, numbers and math. So as age or online learning experience goes up, then that's when we are less likely to agree with a statement. So that sounds a little confusing, so let's break that down. So I feel that a student learns more in a face-to-face course than in an online course. So as age goes up, they're less likely to say that they learn better in a face-to-face setting. And so you look at those numbers next to each other, breaking it down to, I prefer taking classes in a face-to-face setting. That one is also a significant finding there. They're really close in numbers, that they're less likely to agree with that. The more online experience that they gain, they're less likely to. So For me, as I break down these and I look at them, I think you assume, obviously, the age thing. You know, the older you are, the online fits, the non-traditional student like me must be the online learners, right? But when you look at, as their online course experience grows, taking age out of the factor, those numbers are pretty close. So I think when you look at those side-by-side correlations, it suggests that as they become more comfortable and students are more experienced with that online instruction, then they're more likely to find advantages learning in that outside the normal classroom setting. So I'm going to go on to perceived facilitation and control beliefs. And so this is looking at if students or professors were new to online learning when COVID moved instruction online, that this poorly affected their learning and also their perceptions of online learning. Duh, right? If we had a crappy experience online learning, then obviously we're not going to have a positive outcome of that. But it's just one of those things that as we learn and we're more comfortable, we're less afraid to try new things. So this could be interpreted as the more we take, the more we maybe relate to these struggles, or we're able to kind of excuse those things, that the tech issues we have, or the cat walking in front of the screen, or the kid screaming in the background, whatever it is that frustrates us in those Zoom settings, because it fits into our life better. Oh, my blank slide there. So the high flex one was the last one that I kind of talked about. I don't even know if I remember how to go back. There we go. And this suggests that with those more online experience, it's easier to learn. Okay, let me try this again. So this suggests with more online learning experience that you accept it's easier to learn face-to-face versus online. This is a fact that I thought was kind of interesting. So if you're taking online classes, you actually admit that it's easier to learn face-to-face, where when you're taking more face-to-face classes, you maybe think that it isn't as easy. So it's like, we understand and we relate that it requires more of us, that we're not just sitting in a traditional classroom in the back, coasting through class with attendance points. When you're in an online class, you have to participate, you have to be in discussion posts, you have to respond, you have to be held accountable to your due dates on your own volition. It's not your teacher staring you down saying, why didn't you turn in that assignment today? And so it kind of just speaks to a lot of the things that we just knew already, but this actually shows us the data, and it kind of breaks down that barrier of thinking that we're only reaching non-traditional students with this online learning. So we're still in the process of compiling this data analysis, and so as far as what the future holds, my goal is to co-author a research paper with Dr. Anderson and submit this for publication. And then I also plan to continue research on topics like this in graduate school, which now I can say that I will be able to because I was actually accepted at 8 a.m. this morning. Thank you. So, in conclusion, we have only grazed the surface of what research we have here. We asked a lot of questions, and I think the biggest thing is that college used to be a time for relationship development. It used to be about connecting and hanging out with your friends. And now more than ever, it seems like students are juggling careers, that they're juggling home life, and that freedom that online offers just really seems to be more appealing. So I gave an overview on the background of why I focused on this topic, and I shared the highlights of a handful of the findings from our research here. And then lastly, I spoke to the future and what's yet to come. So overall, my takeaway is education is an education, and you get what you put into it. So online learning is not inferior, it's just simply different, and change is hard.
Does anyone have any questions for Ashley?
Okay, so do you think that with having COVID happen, so before COVID, do you think that your numbers would have been different because COVID created so that we all have to experience the online learning instead of only choosing like before all face-to-face and the people who wanted to do online learning? Do you think that COVID created the different perspective, or do you think that the numbers wouldn't have changed?
I think that's an excellent question. We did ask a couple of COVID-specific questions that I haven't even really had a chance to dive into as much, but I think COVID kind of forced us over the bump in the road that we were inevitably going to make our way to. So I think that we knew online instruction was kind of the path to the future, but the resistance of change and the fact that, through the history of learning, we've been face to face. So I think the fact that it was so new, we were resistant, and then the fact that the pandemic forced us to, like, we buck change. As humans, we are resistant to things when you make us have to do them, and when they're unknown to us. So the fear of the unknown, I think, played a big part of it, and then also just that resistance to being forced into it, like your hand was forced. But then, as we were forced into it, I feel like this research kind of shows that we've gone, oh, maybe it's not so bad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I know I have a question. So as a librarian and a researcher, I have really noticed how quickly some studies are coming out because of, based on COVID and the impacts that it has had. So I see you've got some references here, but like nothing in 2022. So did you see references that are already coming out semi-related to your topic? Or are you already kind of at the forefront of hitting on this kind of research?
Well, and I started this project last semester, and so the Hilton Moose and Barnes research that I found in 2020 had kind of just come out. And I think you're right, I'm seeing more and more publications, and that kind of becomes a thing where I almost obsess into finding the newest and what's coming out, because I think that, we saw during the pandemic a big crunch of it, but now it's kind of almost looking at it, as the pandemic happened, and now a couple of years after, what has changed. And so I'm going to be really curious to see what more pops out, because it's a super interesting topic.
And I can show you how to set a search alert so that new information just emails directly to you. So yeah, I'm pushing my trade onto all of you. Any other questions?
I just want to pick up on what McKenna and Ashley both kind of touched on, is time. As far as our culture goes, time is the most valued resource we have, and I think the pandemic taught us lessons about time, and that's why I think you see that pattern that you see there. You guys are different. You were going to school here before the pandemic. You already had those close bonds, those close relationships. The people who come after, I don't know. I'd be interested to look at this longitudinal to see if the folks who already had an old school college experience feel the same way as folks who are getting this modern, contemporary. It's interesting stuff.
Well, too, you think about the ones that were seniors in high school and then still had 2 additional years of mostly online in college. I mean, you could, set up those different groups and really make some interesting comparisons and contrasts.
I thought it was really interesting how these ladies and I have had several classes together, and we had never had any in person, yet we all managed to create like chat groups or email threads or something where when we were struggling through somebody's really difficult classes, that we were able to still find our way around, and like what we would have done in person, we still did online. And I thought that was really cool, because I didn't know anybody. I had never even stepped a foot on campus when I came here.
Fun fact, you could always hit rewind.
Yes.
Which I think is a huge advantage, because I talk fast, I mumble, I stutter, I misspeak. Kenny, you don't have to nod so vociferously.
I can't even look.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. And Ashley will be rejoining us in a little bit, so. Like really a little bit.
Oh, look at that, we're 10-20 on the nose. How do you do that?
Oh, she watched her.
She was so good.
So we have Ashley Young with us again. She is presenting on social interactions and smartphones. And again, she's from the School of Communications and Journalism. Take it away, Ashley.
All right, so redefining norms, smartphone use during social interactions, a tale of survey research gone awry, and lessons learned. So picture this. You're deep in conversation idea of technology interfering with interpersonal communication began with an assignment asking me to look at the world through my lying eyes, and this framework will actually lead through graduation to graduate school. So I was looking at the world to identify relationships that might exist, and then I conducted empirical research to see if the social science actually supported the perception that I held. So today we carry these tiny pocket computers or smartphones that have limitless functions to distract us. This increased functionality means that our smartphones are with us more than ever in situations like never before. So I'll share my research into smartphone interference during social settings. Second, I'll talk about what went awry. And lastly, how the experience taught me perseverance and growth as a researcher. So first I began by finding scholarly research, thank you librarians, regarding smartphone use and interpersonal relationships. So what I learned researching smartphone interference. So many people consider their devices to be an extension of themselves. Rarely do we find it further than arm's length away. Sometimes it's even in the bathroom with you. But I wanted to know if this constant smartphone use interferes with our face-to-face social communication. So while the user is simultaneously engaging with their phone while ignoring or maybe just listening with half an ear, does this multitasking behavior leave the conversational partner feeling slighted by the smartphone user? So several terms are used to describe this modern day phenomenon. So Yang and Christofferson, they defined it as digital social multitasking. So it's multitasking where one of the tasks is actually using either your smartphone or a tablet. And their study looked at dyadic friendship relationships and described activities such as casual in nature, like hanging out or watching TV. So Young and Christofferson's findings reinforced the framework that context plays a vital role in the perception. And so for the majority, or 86% of participants, both themselves and their friend admitted to that digital social multitasking during their interactions. And I thought it was worth noting that 70% agreed that it didn't bother them when their friend was on their phone. So the context seemed to be a valid factor in how this interference was received. And so if the casual or hanging out, or is it like a shared activity where you're on the phone together, does that interference change? Does it make it neutral, or is it a non-issue? So I was looking at, does the social situation, if it's more casual, does that deem the multitasking as a faux pas? So the next study that I looked at was Robert and David's study, and they used a term called phubbing. So the word phone and the word snub were combined. So it defines the behavior of smartphone interference during those social interactions. And theirs focused primarily on romantic relationships. So their study was published in 2016, so it was a little bit earlier than the 2020 for Yang and Christofferson. And their research looked at satisfaction in romantic relationships, and they found that these interruptions or distractions did cause increased conflict in these romantic relationships. So I questioned, would it vary if I looked explicitly at young people, and then I focused in on our MSUM students. How many of you feel like that's you? After diligently conducting my lit review, I settled on two research questions. Are the effects of phubbing perceived differently in romantic versus non-romantic relationships? And then does the situation, serious or casual in context, affect how we perceive the phubbing behavior? So after developing a survey tool based on this focus, there was a few factors that skewed my data collection process. So what went wrong is what I'll talk about secondly. So we had too much data. So again, thanks to COVID-19, in the fall of 2020 when we were compiling this data, the whole class was online. And so we were limited with on-campus access to run SPSS software. And so with remote login constraints, our go-around was we sent our survey to our instructor, and we were able to compile all of the individual surveys on a variety of topics. So mine was on phubbing, some was on religion, some were in political in context, some were about anxiety in college students. So you had a good 15-minute long survey that varied in whether it was a Likert scale, whether it was a yes or no, multiple choice, and it went from survey block to survey block where we all used different scales and different measures. And so so imagine taking a 15, 20-minute long survey and being mindful of your actual selections. So the first thing with this trying to fit too much data where I went wrong is I had my scale flip-flopped from the majority scale. And so there's my research question. So here's the question that I had. So during interpersonal social interaction with your friend, are you likely to use your smartphone? And so you say in conversation, yes, I'm extremely likely. Well, what we actually coded was extremely unlikely. And so as I'm piling my data, at first I just assumed I didn't even look at the scale because I don't know, I thought we all did it the same. And so I'm compiling my data and then suddenly it clicks that this isn't right. And so I panic and I immediately get into a Zoom office meeting with my professor and scream help. And so then we kind of figured out what we could do. And so we had one other error that affected the research, and it was having to do with skip logic. So I was asking two series of questions. If you were in a casual relationship or if you were in a romantic relationship. So if you weren't in a romantic relationship, we didn't need to collect data from you because you wouldn't be relevant to our questions. So the skip logic was supposed to be, are you currently in a romantic or intimate relationship? If yes is not selected, skip to the end of the survey. So if you said no, there you go. And so we first found out that nobody was getting to the series of relationship questions, which I caught it and again panicked, and being the high anxiety student that I am, made Anderson go in and edit it. So we did collect some data on relationships. But we rolled with it, and we ended up with a modified research question. Is the feeling of being ignored by phubbing behavior related to the perception of phubbing as rude? So if you think it's rude and somebody phubs you, that makes sense too. Kind of an aha moment here. But the correlation between feeling ignored when phubbed and feeling rude if you commit phubbing behavior, it speaks to our social norm. So the finding supported our norm that smartphone is still considered to be an interruption or a distraction during our social interactions. In our very small sample, it appears to hold stable. So my third point was, how did this experience help me grow? So I learned it's okay to ask questions and maybe perhaps be annoying when you're not sure if something is correct, because trust your gut. Asking questions is really your way to getting the answers that you need. And often you grow more through realizing these shortcomings and challenges. And I discovered the tenacity that I hold, and I immediately reached out to take on said independent study research that I just presented on earlier, and sought to learn more about these complex methods of research. I knew right then that I wanted to prepare for graduate school, and that understanding research was something that was going to be really important to me. So the final analysis may have resulted in a rudimentary modified research question without really the usable data that I had hoped for, but it piqued my curiosity through my Lying Eyes journey, and it sparked my interest in postgraduate options. So in closing, like many of our plans for 2020, things did not unfold the way I had envisioned. I'll share, I shared over the course of what I found with smartphone interference. I shared what went awry, and also how it taught me perseverance and growth. So my experience, the bumps along the way and things like that is really what brought me here today. And so the next time you're in conversation with another, I really want you to think for a minute when you hear that ping notification that, are you gonna avert your eyes and take a look at your phone from the person you're talking to? Thank you.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so my question is, do you think that phubbing, so I read an article about this, I had to write a paper for Jason, and I wondered, do you think that phubbing is considered to be more rude in did you find that like in the romantic relationships rather than your casual friends? Because I know personally that if casual friends are on their phone diverting their attention to me, I think of it less than if I were to my own, like romantic relationship, just because I feel like that holds a little bit more value, so therefore I consider it to be more rude than with my friends.
Agreed. I think if we would have had a little bit more relationship smartphone and started scrolling, and I felt that he wasn't listening to me. And he felt that he was, that he can multitask. And so that's what led my lying eyes to research phubbing. Because I agree with you. I feel like in that romantic context, you're going to hold it, or a serious conversation, even, you're going to hold it to a higher standard than if it was casual and we were just hanging out. But I'm so interested to see how, as we've evolved and the amount of functions we can do on our smartphone, how many times are we tagging each other in a post? How many times are we taking a group selfie? How many times are you looking up where we're gonna go to eat because we're talking about a restaurant? So what are we doing on our smartphones now, and is it becoming more normalized because we can do so many different things? Are we becoming numb to it? Because I know if the phone would have rang at the dinner table at my grandma's house, it would have been rude to answer that phone and hold a conversation. We were in a room full of people. And it just seems like it's shifting, but it was interesting that with the small data that we had, that, you know, if you felt it was rude, then if someone did it to you, you know, that's what you felt, so.
You guys don't know this, but I read those articles too, thanks to you guys. I'm a persuasion scholar, so when I read that research, I hear contractual obligation, social obligation, guilt, anger. It makes a great deal of sense that a married couple would experience lashing out anger because you signed up for this crap, you know what I'm saying, right? Whereas your friends, it's whatever. You didn't sign, any kind of contract to give me your undivided attention. But it's fascinating that you were looking at really young people by and large in that sample, and even they thought it was quote unquote rude, right? So it's not a new generation thing that it's okay. You think it's okay because you need your fix. So we lie to ourselves.
Fear of missing out.
I tell myself the same lie every time I eat a pizza too. So see how that works out.
Okay, so 3 things, I think. Oh, skip logic and Qualtrics. That's all I'm gonna say. Secondly, did any of your research prove the fact that women are better multitaskers?
I agree with that. I think we are definitely better multitaskers.
Right? And I'm super lucky my husband is not techie, so I'm the flubber in our relationship. And he generally tends to accept it, so it's pretty good. Very interesting research, love it. Any other questions? Okay, we'll get ready for the, and don't forget to, the QR code is there for evaluations. Take one of the 2 tickets for the raffle.
It was 60-60 for the first one. Sorry, I don't think I put that slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect, okay. I just love comm studies majors.
Okay, so where did you, are you gonna hook up into your laptop or did you?
Not so strict.
Well, I don't know, and my often is, because my son graduated a year ago December in economics.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, a little bit different vibe.
Yeah.
We got the 2 different.
Really,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And yeah, so TJ and I, tag team just mothering my son.
Yeah, well, she's really into that, but TJ is. Yeah, I did my internship with her, so that's how I got. And that was the first time I've ever seen her face to face with Bryce Dad, because all of it was,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I so needed that because I was so
So I was
nervous.
really glad that she was there.
Almost made me late.
What was it?
Oh, because I was like,
I was like, these are so relevant.
they send you an email and then they say, log in to see what your decision letter is. And so I'm like, and then my computer won't load and I'm just, I don't remember what we signed this and I'm like, oh. I don't know. So I said, you must have
Yeah, she comes in, she's like, I don't care how the presentation goes. I know it's so no matter. Yeah.
Anderson's like, skip your presentation.
Yeah, I'm gonna go skip my presentation.
And then I saw Denise right when I walked in, next to Dean Beal, and then she's like, ha ha ha, no.
The bars aren't even open, I'm gonna go get a drink.
But she told Dean Beal
Cha-cha.
Isn't there another room where you can go in and watch the live streams?
105 is the other room.
That's what it is.
But are they live streaming another session or just or another room even? Or just ours?
I think all the ones in 105 are. It's 105 and 205 have live stream.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what is this afternoon?
I don't even know what they're doing.
Sand house shooting.
I love Ari. He always
It's gonna be like
he would be
super
picking
so-
really serious topics, but then outside he's like,
He's so funny.
he is.
I don't care if you pull out an evaluation or not, if you still wanna be in the classroom.
Wait, where did you get accepted?
NDSU.
Oh, and this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a prize drawing, it's supposed to entice you to fill out the, evaluations, yeah, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so thankfully ours was recorded.
Yeah.
Yours was recorded.
Yeah, so make sure to put your names and stuff on
record
it.
the live stream too?
What?
Did they record the live stream?
Yeah.
Probably should have checked
Because
this.
Oh, it is going on YouTube.
Yeah,
Okay.
because Abby said he sent our QR, she was watching it from another room.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It's definitely like presentation.
Yeah, I did the QR for you guys.
Woo-hoo. Yeah, we're good.
Yes. I can move on to these things, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, I love your coat. This is super cute. Good job. Thank you.
Talk Jason into joining a committee I chair, and I'm like, we hardly ever meet, we never have, it's been insane. He's like, don't ever ask me.
Never again. I will not be
But
there.
I can usually talk him into stuff, but yeah.
I love her.
Yeah.
And he just makes the meeting better.
Oh, yeah, having classes with him was a very different experience. Cause I was like, I'm such a loud person, and then you're also very interesting. So then when I was talking, he was like, yeah, like.
So funny. And you know, private chat in Zoom is like
Oh, yeah.
evil. That's another version of fubbing.
Yeah. Oh, it totally is. I didn't even think of
I
that.
know. It took, I finally, like, I tested, retested, double tested that no one could read my private chats. No. I said really bad, and
Yeah.
one time I said something to everyone, and I'm like,
Oh.
but it wasn't bad. So
I
I'm
did
like,
that in Jason's class because he said we're watching this video and write down every single thought process that comes to your head. So I was like, absolutely. And so I went on our chat and I accidentally hit enter because they wouldn't want to read it, and I had like cuss words in there. I was like laughing, like all this stuff, and Jason laughed his ass off, read it out loud, and was like, I guess we'll be going over McKenna stuff today.
Okay, now I'm doing it, okay. Again, I'm Stacy Bowler from the library. We have, Peyton Castile with us, and her mentor is Dr. Ada from the School of Media Arts and Design. And she's gonna be talking about residential schools with us.
The white balance changes.
Hello, my name is Peyton Castile. My presentation will be focused on Canadian films that revolve around the themes of residential schools and overcoming the journey of trauma, survival, and healing that Indigenous children went through during their time there. Here is my works cited page. The ones I have highlighted are the ones I will be discussing about most, particularly the articles about school survivors and their stories, as well as each director's take on their film and how they portrayed the trauma. The history of residential schools has been identified as having long-lasting effects on the physical, mental, and psychological well-being of Indigenous people. In recent years, there has been an increasing amount of literature on the strict teachings, poor living conditions, and abuse, whether it was in secret or knowledgeable to others. But what is the context behind all this? Well, that comes into the form of national cinema. The films that I will cover for this topic are Indian Horse by Stephen Campanelli, We Were Children by Tim Wallach-Shattuck, and Rhymes for Young Bulls by Jeff Barnaby. With the analysis and research that I intend to cover, I want to dig deeper into the subject matter and the outcome of the survivor's experience and how they learned from it. But before we can go through any of that, since these are films we're talking about, let us discuss what national cinema even is. According to Stephen Croft's essay, Concepts of National Cinema, he identifies national cinema as a promotion of non-Hollywood cinemas that can be used to send a message in order to strengthen a country's culture. Previous studies have reported that starting way back in the 1800s, more than 150,000 Native youth of the Canadian territories were forcibly taken away from their families at a very early age and placed into residential schools by various religious organizations and funded by the Canadian government. The primary goal of these schools was, as quoted by Ward Churchill, kill the Indian in the child and save the man. There were many indigenous films that addressed this subject, but it often came off as discriminatory whenever Hollywood had a grab at it. In fact, it often failed to deliver the positive diversity due to Hollywood's whitewashing of its cast members. Director Stephen Campanelli, who adapted the 2017 film Indian Horse from its 2012 novel by Richard Wagamese, discusses the mature themes of prejudice, trauma, and acceptance through this coming-of-age story of a young boy named Saul, who was forcibly taken away from his home at a young age and suffered all forms of discrimination at a boarding school in the 1970s. Then, after discovering his love of hockey, he was able to get through the pain with the help of his teammates and foster family. The film draws attention to the art of narrative storytelling that shows Saul's journey from boy to man and the beauty and brutality that brings to light the sins committed against the indigenous people. For this scene breakdown, I will show this video highlighting the struggles that Saul briefly had trouble getting over.
It was a dim world, and I felt dead inside. Beyond thinking, beyond emotion, beyond hope. You drink down, because after all the roads you traveled, that's the only direction you know my heart.
As shown in this video, Saul's reminder of his traumatic childhood had briefly sent him into a drinking phase. After that, he was sent to a rehab center where his therapy group encouraged him to confront the root of his suffering so he can truly be free. Saul then returned to the now closed school and finally put the past behind him in order to embrace the loving family and friends he has today. The second film, We Were Children, is a documentary told by two survivors, Lena Hart and Glenn Adequate, who speak of their own experience, from abuse, sexual abuse, starvation, to all sorts of humiliation. Both lived to tell the tale of the horrific event, and in that time, they had only known pain and suffering, since Glenn's respective age of 6 and Lena's respective age of 4. This is my next scene breakdown from some scenes from the trailer.
All she said to me was to be good and to listen, and she never said any more. I don't think they could even fathom what would happen.
Don't need schools away from your reserve and run by the churches.
No one was allowed to touch each other or to talk to each other.
99? That's you. You will learn to speak God's language.
I could hear the steps coming towards the girls' infirmary, and I was the only one in there. And then I couldn't breathe.
Even from the trailer, this does not shy away from the atrocities that have happened behind the scenes. Lena herself even herself just to put herself out of her misery. But she knew others in the future had to know about this. Liza Meaches, the producer of this docudrama, commented that Lena was really brave in terms of how she shared her testimony, but also how she encouraged other survivors to not weaken with shame and to be open and honest with their families. Glenn was inspired by his own experience to teach his children everything about his culture. And although Lena died before this documentary could be complete, her story touched the hearts of many and encouraged them to take a stand against the colonial system that was designed to be used against them. The third film, Rhymes for Young Ghouls, takes a far more darker approach to the subject matter, almost as if you're watching a horror movie. I mean, look at that bottom image. It looks like it's straight out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It is told from the perspective of teenager Isla, who is sent to a residential school under law and suffers under sadistic Indian agents who are determined to make her life miserable. Cinematographer Michelle St. Martin beautifully captures the blend of harsh reality and magical realism, as well as exploring the themes of power versus powerless and forgetting versus remembering. This last scene breakdown depicts a symbolic moment of the film when the nuns are cutting Isla's hair. From this scene, we can see that the cutting of Isla's hair is meant to symbolize the school attempting to dehumanize her and remove her of all identity and self-worth. However, rather than breaking her, this further empowered Isla to fight against her captors and the system and seek vengeance for the suffering they caused her and the other children. To summarize my main points, we have gone over the insight of trauma and abuse inside the schools and its powerful journey to healing from the perspective of several school survivors. For years, the indigenous people faced discrimination and conquering of their lands, but most importantly, they almost lost their entire culture just by stepping inside of these schools. Overcoming scars is not an easy feat, and it is a delicate process that takes time. But with loved ones by their side and the courage to speak up for their freedom and rights, they will be able to find the strength to heal their wounds and find hope in the darkest hour. Don't kill the Indian in the child, let the child be happy and free.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, so what chose you to get involved with this like concept and just all of this? Like what got you fascinated or intrigued to choose this?
Well, one of my favorite film subjects is a character who starts off really weak, but then over time, as like suffering gets to them, they gradually get stronger and fight against the people who had oppressed them. And I've been a very big fan of Native American culture, so this is just a subject I like to choose.
Thank you. So, there were similar schools like this in the States, correct?
Yes.
And so did we start first or did we model Canada?
I think we modeled Canada.
Okay. I've written down some of the film names. I can't wait to watch them, for sure. No, you've totally broadened because we've heard bits and pieces on the news. I probably haven't read about it as much as I should to be more aware about it. But even, showing films like these to, my children, my daughter's 18th birthday is today, and I think a couple of these films would be very important for her to see and to become more enlightened about. I think there's just so much about the history of, you know, the Native people in our country that it hasn't been told. It's been whitewashed, exactly like you said. So it's just really fascinating to me. I really liked your presentation. Anyone else? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think you said that their like live streaming will be put on YouTube.
Thank you.
I believe it's on MSUM's main YouTube page. I'm not sure.
Okay. And then like, are we the only session live stream? I'm assuming there's more the rest of the day.
I assume there are more.
Okay.
I know that yeah, what is the room that we can sit in and watch live streams? Because that's where Ashley was at, or Abby.
Because they're going to be recorded and put on YouTube, so you could watch them later.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
fun.
I remember there was a series I watched on Netflix.
I really think you watch Friday.
They had like a thing for Native Americans as well. And
I don't
was so
know.
mad how they
You saw it yesterday.
It was like, oh, they put her in a residential school, and
I don't know,
the
sometimes
parents were
they
able to
just
save her.
gotta figure
And I
that
was
out.
like, that at first, and I was like,
doors up.
Yep.
The